Okay, let's discuss the what is meant by hypothesis. I had discussed some of the point related to hypothesis in the previous lecture. Let's move to the further. Hypothesis, as I told you, hypothesis is nothing but assumptions which we make it. Hypothesis is nothing but assumptions which we make it before starting the research, and this assumption based on a theory or concept which we know from the books. Like for the some research, we feel that at the end I will find this. How I can make that particular statement? Because it's based on theory and concept. If you read it carefully, a hypothesis is a specific statement of prediction. So we are predicting that this will happen. We are predicting this will happen. It describes in a concrete term what you expect will happen in your study. What you will expect happen in your study. Not all studies have hypothesis. All the study not necessary to have an hypothesis. A single study may have many hypotheses. These are both statements are very important. All the research may not have a hypothesis, or one research may have number of hypotheses. So I have told an example. Suppose I am doing a research on one of the project, like let's say solar operated water sprinkler system. Now in this particular project, I can say that at the end of this particular research, I can save an electricity. Why I can save an electricity? Because I am using solar energy. At the same time, I can save an water. Why I can save an water? Because I am going to use a sprinkler system. So sprinkler saves water, whereas the solar saves electricity. Why I can make these assumptions? Because it's based on theory. We know the theory of solar system. We know the theory of sprinkler system, and that's why we can make it assumption like this. So this assumption is called as what? Hypothesis. This is nothing but what? A hypothesis. Okay. So some of the study may not have one hypothesis. Some of the study may have more than one hypothesis. Okay. Every true explanation design must have this statement at core of its structure as the ultimate aim of any experiment. In fact, hypothesis is never proved. It is better practice to use the term supported or verified. This means that the research showed that the evidence supported hypothesis, further research is built upon that. So you have to remember the hypothesis assumption which is based on theory and concept. Okay. A hypothesis must be testable. Again, this hypothesis must be tested or testable, taking into account current knowledge and technique, and be realistic. If a researcher does not have multi-million-dollar budget, then there is no point in generating complicated hypothesis. A hypothesis must be verifiable by statistical and analytical means, allow verification and falsification. So here, from the above explanation, from the above definition, we shall understand that the hypothesis must be testable. It should be able to test. Second thing, very important, it should be verified. It should be verified. It should be simple. Again, it should not be too much complex. Okay, these are the point you should remember for what? For the hypothesis. Okay. Characteristic of hypothesis. What are the characteristic of hypothesis? Let's see. Hypothesis should be clear and precise. It should be clear and precise. If the hypothesis is not clear and precise, the inference drawn on its basis cannot be taken reliable. So if it is not clear, if it is not precise, then the research which we are doing, that will not be reliable. Hypothesis should be capable of being tested. That already we have discussed. It should be tested. In a swamp of unstable hypothesis, many a time research programs have bogged down. Some prior study may be done by researcher in order to make hypothesis testable. A hypothesis is testable if other deduction can be made from it, which in turn can be confirmed or disproved by observation. This we are going to discuss in next slide. Hypothesis should state relationship between variables if it happen to be a relational hypothesis. So relational hypothesis is another type, and if it is relational hypothesis, it should give a relationship between various variables. Hypothesis should be limited in scope, must be specific. So it should be specific and it should be limited in scope. A researcher must remember that narrower hypotheses are generally more testable and he should develop such hypothesis. So what we have to do, we have to develop narrower hypothesis. We have to develop what? A narrower hypothesis. Why? Because it can be tested very well. It can be tested very well, and that's why narrower hypotheses are preferable. Hypothesis should be stated as far as possible in most simple terms. It should be most simple terms, so that same is easily understandable. It should be easily understandable by all concerned. But one must remember that simplicity of hypothesis has nothing to do with its significance. The simplicity and significance, these are not related. Some of the students may feel that if hypothesis is too simple, then it may not be significant, but it's not at all have any relationship. A simple hypothesis will have a good significance also. Good significance also. Hypothesis should be consistent with most known fact, that is, it must be a consistent with substantial body, established fact. In other words, it should be one which judge accept being most likely. Hypothesis should be amenable to testing within a reasonable time. It should be tested within a reasonable time. One should not use even an excellent hypothesis if the same cannot be tested. So if you are having excellent hypothesis but it is not tested, then don't go for such kind of hypothesis. That's what a point we have written here. Okay, these are some characteristic of hypothesis. Another characteristic of hypothesis is what? Hypothesis must explain the fact that give rise to need for explanation. This means that by using hypothesis plus other known acceptable generalization, one should be able to deduce original problem condition. Thus hypothesis must actually explain what it claims to explain. It should have empirical references. Okay, so these are some characteristic of hypothesis. The hypothesis are inductive hypothesis and deductive hypothesis. What is that inductive hypothesis and deductive hypothesis? That we are going to see it. Okay, so this is a chain. Hypothesis is based on a prediction, assumption, and test of prediction. Whatever predicted, whether it forms correct or not. If it forms correct, then our research will be successful. Otherwise, research will not be successful. Now, what is deductive approach? What is deductive approach? In deductive approach, first there is a theory. From theory it goes for hypothesis. From hypothesis it goes for observation, and then confirmation. This is deductive theory. So first of all, we take base of theory, and then on the basis of this theory we put an hypothesis. Now whether this hypothesis is correct or not, for that purpose I am going to take an observation, and after finding an observation we will confirm that this particular hypothesis is correct. This is what called as deductive approach. This is what called as deductive approach. What is inductive approach? First we are going to take the observation. In the previous case we have done observation in the third step, you can see here. Whereas here we are going to observe, then we are going to study the pattern of this. After studying the pattern, then we are going to put hypothesis, and then from hypothesis we are going to derive this particular theory. So this theory we are going to find out by the inductive approach. Okay, so deductive approach and inductive approach we have seen it. In the inductive approach, let's see, inductive reasoning works on other way, moving from specific observation to broader generalization theories. Informally, we sometimes call this bottom-up approach. This is also called as bottom-up approach because we start at bottom and goes to the top. Please note that it's not bottom-up, it's bottom-up, not bottoms up, which is kind of things says customer